At the dawn of a new millennium, car buyers were spoilt for choice when it came to really clever and innovative cars. There was the Renault Scenic, the original MPV that showed you can pack a large family into not a lot of car. Then there was the Mercedes A-Class, a masterclass in space management with a cleverly packaged engine that allowed for the maximum interior space. And don't forget the hideous but highly innovative Fiat Multipla that offered 3 wide seating that could be removed to turn a family car into something that could best a Volvo estate. Audi entered the fray with another highly innovative car, the A2. It followed on the heels of the TT, another car that took Audi to new engineering heights. The A2 was Audi's new mass car, a vehicle they hoped would appear on every middle-class family's driveway. Yet the car was a colossal failure, only selling 176,000 cars before its production run was unceremoniously cut short. Just why was that? And how was it so innovative? This is the Audi A2 story. Mercedes, Audi and BMW had seen fat profits as standards of living rose in Europe and Americans warmed to the quality of German luxury cars. Those profits could be ploughed into expanding their range to smaller cars to continue capturing more of the market. BMW bought Rover to do to the mass market what they'd done to the luxury market. Mercedes merged with Chrysler to use the third largest car company in America as their springboard to mass car sales. Both these ventures would end in disaster, but Mercedes had a pretty big side bet, an upscale luxury small car of their own invention, the A-Class, that launched in 1996. Now, if you know anything about German car makers, you'll know that they're ultra competitive. If one makes something new, the other needs to answer it with something better. That's what got them to dominate the market in the first place. So it was natural for Audi's management to give the go-ahead to expand into the compact luxury sector, but with something even more innovative than Mercedes' new A-Class. This was a highly innovative time at Audi. A team had moved away from the main design centre and challenged themselves to make the perfect no-compromise roadster. They succeeded, and some, with a TT that launched in 1998. The team behind the new compact car set themselves equally lofty goals. It should transport 4 people in comfort from Stuttgart to Milan on 1 tank of fuel. That's a distance of only 314 miles, which might not seem a lot, but there's a lot of elevation change that saps the range. So either the car needed a very large fuel tank or it needed to be ultra efficient. It also meant that this small city car needed to be able to handle long road trips in comfort. As Audi said at the A2's launch, their goal was to make a small Audi, not a cheap Audi. The car should feel as premium as any other in their range, the same attention to detail, the same quality of materials, and in how it drove. Audi saw this as a second car for existing Audi customers or for fleet buyers who would appreciate the fuel efficiency. They, of course, also hoped it would steal sales from Mercedes A-Class or from regular mass-market compact cars. Excellent fuel economy requires a small fuel-sipping engine. That kills performance, and Audi wasn't going to make a car that dawdled down the road. It was an Audi, for crying out loud. It had to have at least half-decent performance. That meant tweaking the other parts of the fuel economy equation, better drag and lower weight. The 1994 Audi A8 was what Audi called the first series production vehicle in the world with a completely aluminium body. That's a lot of legal speak to dance around the fact that it wasn't the first car to have an all-aluminium monocoque. That was the Honda Acura NSX. But Audi had a lot of knowledge making aluminium chassis in production. Aluminium saved a considerable amount of weight, so why not use it on the new car? The team used the lessons learned on the A8 to make a monocoque that could stand up to crash tests, be stiff enough to handle fast bends, and use as little expensive aluminium as possible to have a light car that wouldn't cost a fortune. Audi's sister company Volkswagen had a whole raft of fuel-efficient engines, so surely one of these would work. In fact, Volkswagen were building their own fuel-efficient car, the Lupo, and that used a range of small but peppy engines, including 1.2-litre 3-cylinder diesel with astonishing fuel economy. The body had to have as little drag as possible, and Audi had a lot of experience in wind-cheating designs. The 1982 Audi 100 was a very efficient shape with a drag coefficient of 0.3, but Audi's new car needed to be on another level. That meant changing the shape to one many designers were moving towards, the cut-off teardrop. It's what Toyota would use for the Prius for precisely the same reasons. The car would be taller like the Mercedes A-Class for two main reasons. It maximised interior space for this compact car, but it also provided a high driving position which customers preferred. This meant that, like the A-Class, Audi's concept would have a double floor, which would give it a very deep and usable boot. The car first appeared as the AL2 concept at the 1997 Frankfurt Motor Show. The name was presumably chosen to celebrate the aluminium monocoque, or Audi space frame as it was called, that gave the car its weight advantage. There was certainly a family look between this and Audi's TT concept that by this stage was close to production. Both shared a striking minimalist design with a similar front-end treatment, but there were also clear parallels with the Mercedes A-Class. In the autumn, the AL2 open end was shown at the Tokyo Motor Show. If the 3- or 5-door concepts made it to production and did well, maybe there could be other versions like this. But would the AL2 ever make production? The motoring press was sceptical. After all, trying to make an all-aluminium platform at this scale for the right price would be quite a challenge. But like the TT a few years before, this outlandish concept had been designed with production in mind, and there had been enough interest for Audi's management to approve production. For 2 years, Audi's engineers tweaked the design and managed to ramp up production of their extraordinary new compact car. The Audi A2 launched at the 1999 Frankfurt Motor Show. It was immediately clear that, like the TT, there hadn't been much compromise from the original vision. It still used an aluminium chassis that was 43% lighter than steel. Audi touted it as the first mass-produced all-aluminium platform. The body had changed a little since the concept, but not in a great way. It still had the same excellent drag factor, just 0.28. And when combined with 1.4-litre petrol and diesel engines, this made the A2 a very frugal car. The diesel produced what Audi called a 4-litre car. That is, it could go 100 kilometres or 62 miles on just 4 litres of fuel. That's over 70 miles per gallon. And you didn't even need to get your hands dirty lifting up the bonnet, because there was a convenient flap that allowed you to check the dipstick, add more oil and washer fluid. If you did want to get underneath the bonnet, there were 2 quick release fasteners, but Audi didn't expect that to happen very often, as both engines were designed to be serviced every 2 years. Audi were of course keen to compare the car to its main competitor, the Mercedes A-Class. The A2 was more than 200 kilos lighter thanks to the aluminium monocoque. It also had a lower drag factor. That meant that despite both cars having a 1.4-litre engine, the A2 was both faster and more fuel efficient. It was bigger inside as well. Some criticised the A-Class as having a tiny boot, so most of the A2's extra space was given over to the boot, which could fit a lot of cargo with the rear seats in place, and thanks to multiple configuration options could open up to be truly cavernous. Audi said the interior space was almost as big as the A4, a car 69 centimetres longer, and all this in a car shorter and lighter than the Ford Fiesta. The interior was classic Audi, high quality materials with a fit and finish to the same standards as their larger, more expensive cars. Top Gear magazine called it over-engineered, but in a good way. The designers clearly had a passion for making the best car possible, so even the cup holder was something finely crafted. The rear floor was lower, giving more legroom for rear passengers. Extras included an open sky glass roof, climate control, parking aids, and hands-free phone with voice control. But even so, base models seemed a little stingy. For example, the UK model didn't have a CD player, and rear passengers had to make do with wind-down windows that seemed a little cheap on an Audi at the turn of the millennium. Of course, kids today see them so rarely that they find them actually quite a novelty. But what was the A2 like to drive? Reviewers got behind the wheel and liked what they found. There were confident predictions it would be a roaring success, kicking the A-Class into touch. Autocar said the best thing about the A2 is that it isn't merely a design exercise. Yes, it's a great car to look at, sit in and touch, but it's also a riot to drive. It was a fun car that also didn't fall over. Although it was high-sided, Audi paid special attention to it passing the ELK test with flying colours. This was something Mercedes A-Class famously failed at when it launched just 3 years earlier. Customers would have to wait to get their hands on the new wonder car though. Although it was shown in September 1999, it would take 9 months for production to begin in earnest at a factory that could churn out 60,000 A2s every year. Volkswagen boss Ferdinand Piëch made bold promises, and he generally kept them. One was to produce a 3-litre car, a car that could go 100 kilometres on 3 litres of fuel. That's around 94 miles per gallon in the UK or 79 miles per gallon in the US, something truly remarkable. That car would be the Volkswagen Lupo 3L with a 3-cylinder 1.2 litre diesel engine. Audi fitted it to the A2 and worked their magic to hit the same fuel efficiency goal. The drag was further reduced from 0.28 to 0.25 by adding underbody panels to minimise drag, as well as altering the rear spoiler. It included an auto start-stop feature, narrower tyres and lighter rear seats. The fuel tank was reduced to just 21 litres and the spare tyre was ditched for a repair kit. All this chopped another 40 kilos off the curb weight. But this wasn't an underperforming hypermiler. The car still got adequate acceleration, around 14 seconds to 60 miles an hour. It's a shame though it wasn't sold much beyond its native Germany. That may be because the A2 wasn't exactly flying out of showrooms. The car hadn't been the hit that Audi thought it would, so maybe more power would help with the 1.6 litre petrol engine that got the 0 to 60 time under 10 seconds for the first time while still giving decent fuel economy. That was quicker but not exactly sports car territory, so it was all the more surprising that high-spec versions got S-Line sports suspension with sports seats and a sports steering wheel. There was the 2002 Colorstorm Special Editions, and a year later the A2 got a light facelift. The front grille had a louvered design, but it was still solid. Behind the grille was a not-rated 1.4 litre diesel engine. In 2004, Audi gave the futuristic A2 a suitably futuristic hydrogen fuel cell. This was purely a concept with a range of 137 miles using 3 compressed gas tanks and a not too shabby 10-second 0 to 60 time. Hydrogen might be a potential future fuel source, but the A2 wasn't going to use it. Audi was losing £6,300 on every car they produced, and the Mercedes A-Class continued to outsell it 4 to 1. Audi pulled the plug in 2005, 3 years before the A2 would normally have been replaced. They'd only sold 176,000 cars, with the factory running at half capacity. And so the A3 remained Audi's smallest model until the A1 arrived in 2010. This wasn't the highly innovative car the A2 had been. It was based on the Volkswagen Polo platform. This made for a less scary shape and it costs a lot less to develop. It could also be produced on the existing Polo production line. All of this saved money and meant the new car stood a better chance at breaking even. The A2 disaster didn't stop Audi innovating though. If a company stops innovating, it dies. Audi needed to learn from its mistake and create something the public actually wanted. Reports of a new A2 surfaced in 2009, and this time there would be an electric version. Audi were reacting to the new Tesla Roadster that threatened to upend the internal combustion status quo. The A2 concept broke cover 2 years later exclusively as an EV. It was a little smaller than the old car and surprisingly even shorter than the A1. With a completely new drivetrain, Audi used the opportunity to rewrite the automotive rulebook. There would be brake-by-wire, steer-by-wire, gear shifting by wire, really almost anything you could do with a car would be done with some sort of wire. The car tipped the scales at 1,150 kilos thanks to the next generation Audi aluminium space frame along with fancy carbon fibre bits. But that lightweight also signalled there probably wouldn't be many heavy batteries, so not much range. That indeed proved to be the case. The range was only 125 miles. Audi saw the new A2 as more of a city car similar to the Nissan Leaf, but there would be an option of a range-extending petrol engine. Audi had their eyes on the work Chevrolet was doing with the Volt that would appear in Europe as the Vauxhall Opel Ampera. In 2009, this type of plug-in hybrid was giving all car manufacturers the heebie-jeebies as it seemed it could be the future. Inside there was a minimal interior with the latest technology and there would be an always-on internet connection. It seems Audi's vision of the future was distracting you with the latest social media posts whilst you were driving. The transparent roof could be dimmed at the flick of a switch. Well, not really a switch. Those were being ditched for a large touchscreen after the success of Apple's iPhone. We were also promised semi-autonomous driving. As I said at the start, the German Big Three were always trying to one-up each other. BMW had been noticeably silent during the whole Mercedes A-Class Audi A2 battle, mainly because they were licking their wounds after the Rover debacle. But that didn't stop them thinking of their own radical small car concept with an EV twist now that that powertrain was the latest hotness. So the BMW i3 previewed in 2011, and it was a car that was, if anything, more radical than the A2. Forget aluminium, this had a carbon fibre chassis, the first time such a large structure had been used on a mass-produced car. Like the A2, it was an EV with a relatively short range, and like the A2, it had an engine that acted as a range extender. No wonder when the A2 launched, Audi had said it had been produced as an answer to the BMW i3. It seems there are no secrets between the German luxury car makers. The i3 arrived in 2013, and Audi promised the new A2 would hit dealers by 2015, but they almost immediately got cold feet. They estimated that they'd need to sell it for around £34,000, 15% more than the BMW i3. But that decision proved to be a good one. The i3 never seemed to capture the public's imagination, and production ended in 2022. And so thoughts of a new A2 fell silent. That was until 2021 when Audi hinted that they might do another EV version between the A1 and the A3. Quite what it would look like was purely speculation. Apparently Audi were working on something and it would be inspired by the AIM concept that launched the same year. Audi wouldn't be drawn as to whether it would wear the cursed A2 badge though. So far there's been no word on a future A2, but as the expression goes, third time's a charm. The late 1990s saw a lot of automotive innovation. There were few hits and a lot of misses. Out of the cars I talked about at the start, it was the Renault Scenic that became the big success. Mercedes might have sold 2 million of the A-Class over 2 generations, but they lost money on every one, and it was replaced with something more conventional in 2012. The Fiat Multipla's odd looks were chucked in the bin for a bland restyle that also failed to capture the public's imagination. The Audi A2 was by far the least successful though. Where the first generation Mercedes sold 1 million cars, the A2 only sold 176,000. So much for it being touted as the first mass-produced car with an all-aluminium platform. It didn't sell many more than the all-aluminium car that came before it, the Audi A8. When the A2 launched, Audi focused on how clever the car was. It used aluminium that didn't rust and it had great aerodynamics. In Audi's marketing video, they said in the interior, fashionable gimmicks were deliberately avoided. Instead, there was functional design. The interior was undoubtedly high quality, but it was playing into the German stereotype, that is, it was lacking in passion. What customers seemed to desire was a car they could connect to emotionally. Maybe that's why they avoided the A2 and bought the Mini in their droves. That car was chock full of passion and character, and ironically from another German company. Another problem was that the VW Group already had two very good A2 competitors, the Audi A3 and the Volkswagen Golf. Both cars were well built with a similar spec, and the Golf was a little cheaper. The ultra fuel efficient A2 was also aiming at a very specific type of driver, someone who had enough money for an Audi but also wanted to save their pennies on fuel or cared about the environment. And you had to be a fan of the A2's looks. Audi were betting this was a big market, but sadly it wasn't. Few A2s were built and they quickly disappeared from our roads. Customers found that crash damage was much harder to repair on an aluminium space frame, so more cars were written off before their time. But did the A2 really die? It might have looked odd in 2000 when it launched, but Audi sells a car that's very similar to the A2 today. They've just given it another name, the Q2. That's a little bigger and a lot heavier, but it's got similar aerodynamic drag and the diesel engine returns a decent 70 miles per gallon. Today we'd probably call the A2 a crossover, and those cars sell like hot cakes. So was the A2 just a car that was ahead of its time? If you think 94 miles per gallon is good, how about 280? That's what Volkswagen's XL1 got, or so the company claimed. See the whole story with a link on the right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.